Men didn't stop loving women. They stopped losing themselves in the name of love. That's the shift most people refuse to name because it's quieter than rage and harder to mock than heartbreak. It doesn't come with speeches. It doesn't come with public declarations. It shows up in absence, in effort that never gets offered, in invitations that never get sent, in a man who used to chase choosing instead to go home, train, work, sleep, and build. For centuries, men were taught that love is proven through sacrifice, that devotion is measured by what you give up, that loyalty means endurance, that if you can carry enough, you deserve enough. So men carried. They carried pressure. They carried responsibility. They carried the emotional weather in the room. They carried the expectation to provide without complaint, to protect without recognition, to stay calm while being criticized, to be strong while being misunderstood. And some of that was noble. Some of it built families and stability. But in the modern world, that same model often feels less like romance and more like a drain, less like partnership and more like performance. Men aren't refusing love, they're refusing emotional debt. They're refusing the unspoken contract that says, give more, apologize more, tolerate more, and call it maturity. Meanwhile, many modern women rise with a new language: independence, self sufficiency. I don't need a man. And on paper, that sounds empowering. It can be, but it also changes the emotional climate between the sexes. Because when one side insists they don't need you, and the other side has been punished for giving too much, the natural result isn't intimacy, it's distance. So men step back, not loudly, not to prove a point, not to punish anyone. They step back because they've learned a hard truth. Peace is more fulfilling than being needed. They're tired of being judged primarily by what they can offer rather than who they are. Tired of feeling like their value fluctuates based on income, status, lifestyle, or how well they perform a role. Tired of investing into dynamics where the standard is constantly moving, where effort is expected but rarely protected, where a man's calm is called emotional unavailability, and his boundaries are called control. So they stop performing. They stop inviting women out just to get evaluated, like a job candidate, over appetizers and an expensive bill. They stop spending on meaningless dinners to earn temporary warmth. They stop competing for attention like love is a prize and not a choice. They stop being the one who must initiate, reassure, entertain, explain, and absorb. And what looks like detachment from the outside is often just awakening on the inside. Because when a man learns how to be alone without being lonely, he becomes dangerous in a way modern culture can't easily manipulate. Not dangerous to others, dangerous to the old. Leverage, dangerous to guilt, dangerous to pressure, dangerous to the tactics that rely on a man fearing abandonment more than he values his dignity. Once he tastes solitude that feels clean, he stops bargaining for affection that costs him self respect. That doesn't mean he hates women. It doesn't mean he's cold. It doesn't mean he's incapable of love. It means he's no longer willing to pay any price for it. And that's why the dynamic reverses. Because when men stop chasing, the chase loses its power. When men stop negotiating their worth, the market changes. The same men who once ran toward love are now being approached by it. Not because they became manipulative, but because they stopped being controllable. That's the part nobody wants to admit. A man who doesn't need love to define him becomes the kind of man love can't threaten. And women feel it. Not because women are mind readers, because humans sense stability. Humans sense when someone's center holds. A man who has peace is not easily pulled into drama. A man who values his time doesn't jump through hoops for attention. A man who isn't starving can choose his meals. So his questions change. He doesn't ask, "Does she like me?" He asks, "Does this align with my peace?" He doesn't ask, "How do I keep her?" He asks, "Is she adding to my life or draining it?" He doesn't ask, "What do I need to do to prove myself?" He asks, "What is she proving through her behavior?" That's not arrogance, that's adulthood. And once that shift happens, the energy changes in a way that's hard to describe but easy to feel. He moves slower. He speaks cleaner. He doesn't over explain. He doesn't beg for clarity. He doesn't chase mixed signals. His attention has weight because it's not unlimited. His affection is real because it's not used as a currency. That's why so many women find themselves confused. Because on the surface, they may be attractive, ambitious, self sufficient. They feel like they did everything right. They improved themselves. They built careers. They learned independence. They polished their image. Yet the men they want aren't showing up with the same hunger their fathers had. Those men aren't lining up to be chosen. They aren't easily impressed. They aren't easily hooked. And the conclusion some women jump to is that men are emotionally absent. But the truth is more uncomfortable. Many men are emotionally disciplined. They're not broken. They're awake. They're not detached because they can't love. They're detached because they finally learned what love costs when it's built without balance. This calm has consequences, yes, not all of them good. When men step back en masse, society doesn't just lose romance, it loses glue. Because relationships, healthy ones, are part of what stabilizes communities, families, and future generations. But it's important to understand what produced the retreat before you judge the retreat. This didn't come from nowhere. It was forged in pain, betrayal, exhaustion, and loss. And for many men, the most brutal teacher wasn't dating apps or social media, it was divorce. Divorce doesn't just break a relationship, it breaks a man's sense of security in the institution of commitment. It teaches him that love can end abruptly, but consequences can continue for years. It teaches him that the emotional story and the legal story are not the same story, that what felt sacred can become procedural, that what was once ours can become itemized, divided, scheduled, negotiated. A lot of men enter marriage believing love will protect them. They believe partnership means mutual loyalty, mutual sacrifice, mutual recovery if things go wrong. Then the papers get signed and life becomes transactional. Time with children becomes scheduled. Home becomes a memory. Routine becomes a new address. Income becomes math. Peace becomes something you rebuild alone. And the world tells him to stay strong while his identity is being stripped down to the studs. This is not a speech against marriage. Plenty of marriages are good. Plenty of women are good. Plenty of men are good. This is about the reality that many men experience. When the structure collapses, they learn how little protection they have for rebuilding. And then something unexpected happens in the wreckage. They discover quiet, not the lonely kind, the clean kind, mornings without tension, evenings without emotional negotiations, weekends that belong to them, a home that is calm, a mind that can breathe. And once a man experiences that kind of peace after years of friction, it changes him permanently. Because peace is addictive in the best way. It doesn't spike like drama. It doesn't intoxicate like chaos. It doesn't come with fireworks. It comes with sleep, with focus, with stability, with the absence of that constant, invisible pressure to manage someone else's moods while denying your own. And once he finds that, he doesn't look back with hatred. He looks back with clarity. He realizes that the freedom he was told to fear is sometimes the sanctuary he always needed. That's why so many divorced men never remarry. Not because they hate women, because they've seen what it costs to rebuild when the system doesn't care how you recover. They've seen devotion get weaponized. They've watched promises become penalties. They've learned that forever can quietly mean until the emotional climate changes. So when they say, the juice isn't worth the squeeze, it's not always bitterness. Sometimes it's wisdom paid for with years. And when enough men internalize that lesson, society feels it. Because when men stop believing in the old story, marriage is the ultimate marker of success, relationships as proof of worth, chasing as masculinity, the entire dating culture starts to tremble. Look at what's happened. Dating has become more transactional. Expectations have become louder. Standards are sometimes confused with demands. Attention has become a substitute for intimacy. Validation has become a substitute for love. And men notice. They notice that a man's effort is often treated as an obligation, while his boundaries are treated as an offense. They notice that being emotionally available is sometimes interpreted as being endlessly pliable. They notice that the modern romance script can feel like a test you can never pass because the grading system is feelings that change daily. So many men choose solitude, not because they fear connection, but because they refuse constant emotional volatility. They've learned a crucial distinction. Being alone is not the same as being lonely. Loneliness can be managed. It can be worked with. It can be converted into growth through discipline, friendships, hobbies, purpose, spiritual grounding, physical training, and meaningful work. But a toxic relationship doesn't just make you lonely. It makes you small. It rots your nervous system. It drains your focus. It makes you doubt yourself. It turns your home into a place you can't rest. It makes your life feel like a constant negotiation for basic respect. So men make a cold calculation that isn't cold at all. It's protective. Better to be single and occasionally restless than partnered and perpetually drained. Misery can suffocate you in a crowded room. Solitude can be transformed into strength. And once men learn that, companionship stops being synonymous with happiness. Partnership without peace starts to look like another kind of prison. This leads to another fracture nobody talks about honestly. Men and women often operate with different emotional languages. Men live in a world that rewards logic, structure, and composure. At work, rationality earns respect. Calm earns promotions. Clear boundaries earn authority. But in love, that same composure can be misread as distance. Women more often seek resonance. They want to feel felt. They want warmth, emotional presence, connection. They often experience love through the atmosphere, not the spreadsheet. So a man enters with a builder mindset: fix, protect, stabilize. A woman enters wanting experience: feel, connect, explore. And the relationship becomes two languages spoken in the same room. He provides, plans, protects, solves, and still gets called emotionally unavailable. He opens up once and gets labeled fragile. He expresses frustration and gets told he's too intense. He tries to stay calm and gets told he doesn't care. He tries to explain and gets told he's making it logical. So he learns silence is safer, but silence kills connection. So he withdraws, not because he's heartless, but because caring has become a liability. Again, this isn't blame, it's a mismatch. Modern culture teaches Men to suppress emotions and women to prioritize experience. Men are punished for emotional expression in some contexts, then punished for emotional restraint in others. Women are encouraged to be independent, then confused when men aren't needed the way they once were. No one wins in that confusion. So the man chooses what he can control, his inner equilibrium. He'd rather live in a messy apartment with peace than a perfect home built on tension. He'd rather have solitude with freedom than companionship with restraint. And in that solitude, something sacred forms, self-mastery. But here's the part that society avoids, because it's bigger than dating. When millions of men lose faith in connection, legacy, and meaning, it becomes a structural problem. A man without belief doesn't just quietly vanish, he redirects his energy. Some men will channel it into growth, fitness, business, craft, community, faith, discipline, contribution. Others will channel it into resentment, cynicism, isolation, addiction, nihilism, anger. And when enough men choose the second path, it becomes an existential powder keg. This isn't about blaming women. This is about acknowledging that societies rely on men who believe in something larger than themselves: family, duty, future, contribution, legacy. When a society drains men of purpose but still expects obedience, rebellion becomes inevitable. Not always violent, but cultural. Men stop participating. They stop building families. They stop investing in institutions. They stop caring about outcomes they don't feel protected within. And a world without fathers, without engaged men, without stable masculine contribution doesn't collapse instantly. It decays slowly. So the question becomes, what now? Here's where the narrative needs an upgrade. Men don't need to return to the old systems blindly. They need to redefine legacy. Legacy no longer has to mean a marriage contract. It can mean impact, ideas, businesses, mentorship, art, community, philosophy, work that outlives you. Because meaning is not inherited through relationship status. Meaning is created through contribution. A man's legacy doesn't have to breathe. It has to matter. Some men build families, others build foundations for other people's families through work, leadership, service, and excellence. The common thread isn't marriage, it's an intention. This is why the modern man who chooses peace isn't automatically lost. He may be early in a reinvention. He may be building a life where connection is welcomed, but not worshipped, where love is valued, but not used as the foundation of identity, where intimacy is a choice, not a desperate requirement. And the older a man gets in this new frame, the more the benefits compound. In his 30s, solitude stops feeling like punishment and starts feeling like investment. He gets sharper, he gets healthier, he gets more disciplined, he earns more, he spends smarter, he learns what drains him and what fuels him. He stops confusing attention with respect. In his 40s, his vision sharpens. He's seen enough to stop romanticizing red flags. He understands what peace costs and what chaos costs. He stops expecting softness from people who are still in competition mode. He stops gambling with his nervous system. And when he does choose a woman, it's not because he needs saving. It's because she adds peace, not excitement alone, not beauty alone, not status alone. Peace, reciprocity, respect, alignment, shared values, clean communication, mutual effort. The world may label him cold, but he isn't cold. He's composed. He isn't emotionally unavailable. He's emotionally accountable. He doesn't explode, but he doesn't tolerate. He doesn't chase, but he does love. He doesn't beg, but he does commit when it's earned. That's the real evolution. Men aren't walking away because they're weak. They're walking away because they finally understand the true cost of staying asleep. They've realized that modern love, as it's often practiced, asks for too much self abandonment and offers too little peace in return. So they choose clarity. And clarity is not the enemy of love, it's what makes love possible without destruction. Because love stripped of illusion is not about ownership, dependence, or performance. It's about alignment. It's about two whole people choosing each other without needing to dominate, fix, or consume. And the men who understand that didn't stop loving. They simply started loving wisely. Sometimes peace isn't found in partnership, it's found in presence. Sometimes love isn't something to chase, it's something to protect. And the man who learns that doesn't become harder, he becomes steadier. And in a world addicted to drama, steady is rare. That's why the distance between the sexes feels wider right now. Not because love died, but because illusions did. And once illusions die, only truth can build what comes next.